Well, look, we're joined now by the Washington Post's Jem Rieger. He's kindly agreed to get up very early to speak to us. Hello and good morning.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being with us. So, look, what was the message Donald Trump was trying to communicate to the American public with that speech, do you think?
You know, it was interesting. He played a lot to the base. There was a lot of culture war in that speech. But in some ways, I think this is sort of it's both a crossroads speech for the administration. They've had a flurry of activity in the first 5-6 weeks here. But there's a lot of challenges coming up for them, both on the international front and also the government. The government shuts down here in now 9 days. There's not a tangible plan right now to keep the government open that's on the table. And on top of that, Trump's main legislative initiatives, both getting kind of an immigration package through and also a tax cut package through the House and Senate, Republicans are at odds on how to do that still. So I think for Trump's base, for Trump's ardent supporters, that speech played very well last night. But in some ways, I think this might be a fleeting moment as we move into kind of the tangible things that the administration's doing or trying to do.
I mean, obviously for us over here, we're obsessed with the foreign policy aspects of what the administration is doing. How important is that on the ground in the US, where you are, of course, less foreign than we are?
I think there's a recognition, definitely among Democrats, but even among some independents, that there is a move here, or there's an attempted move by the administration to move beyond sort of the post-World War II order and infrastructure in some ways, on an economic front with tariffs, on a foreign policy front with what we're seeing in Ukraine, even the comments that Trump has made in some ways about the Middle East, and also on a domestic front with what we're seeing with Elon Musk with the U.S. Doge service. I think, but I will point out that we had some CBS YouGov polling within the last week, and 44% of American respondents said that they were neutral in the Russia-Ukraine conflict and which side they were supporting or were coming down on. So there has been sort of a groundswell of shift on that we've seen even over the last year or two. And if you look at Republicans in Congress, Speaker Mike Johnson was seated right behind Trump. And last year and the year before was very instrumental in getting Ukraine aid across the finish line in Congress. Now you see someone like Mike Johnson, you see someone like Donald Trump. Donald Trump, when 2 weeks into the war back in 2022, called it a Holocaust. Now Trump won't even say that Russia was the aggressor in Ukraine. So we've seen a wholesale shift among Republicans on that. And I think that's been the most striking component of how much things have shifted in the U.S. and how quickly it's shifted, especially on Ukraine and on sort of the traditional Western alliance post-World War II.
Absolutely. Look, there was some protest last night from Democrats. Tell us what happened there and how kind of universal that opposition was.
Yeah, I mean, 5 minutes into the speech, you had Al Green, who introduced impeachment articles against Donald Trump in his first term and is working on impeachment articles already for his second term, who stood up in protest. And the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, summoned in the House Sergeant at Arms, which is basically the policeman for the House chamber, for the House side of Congress, to escort him out. It was just a remarkable moment. I can't remember it ever happening in a joint address or in a State of the Union address. And by the end of the speech, you had many, many Democrats leave the chamber, which is also something that I can't remember in any of the speeches that I've covered. And really was quite a moment, especially because right now, a lot of folks are wondering, especially Democrats are wondering, what is the Democratic response going to be? They've been very united on a voting front when pieces of legislation have come to the floor in the House and Senate so far. But on a strategic front, they've been sort of all over the map. And that last night was sort of an encapsulation of that. Nancy Pelosi, the House Speaker Emerita, gave an interview to the Washington Post over the weekend and basically said that Democrats should not make themselves part of the story in this joint address. Let Trump speak and then move on. And what we saw from some members last night was really the complete opposite of that, and shows that Democrats are still kind of trying to figure out what the response should be to Trump.
Thank you very much indeed, Jem Rieger of the Washington Post speaking there.